Well, welcome to another episode of Strange Appalachia. Tonight we're continuing our theme with Halloween, and we're going to cover mountain witches tonight. Of course, when we talk about witches in the Appalachian Mountains, the Bell Witch is the most common story that will come up. Hands down, if you Google Appalachian Witch, the Bell Witch is almost always going to be the top 10 things that pop up. So we're going to talk about that story a little bit, and then we'll touch on kind of like what's called a granny witch in the Appalachian Mountains, and those are kind of like folk healers. We'll talk about some of the powers or spells that these granny witches supposedly cast, and then we'll talk a little bit about more of I guess, the demonic or the infernal witch in the Appalachian Mountain, because those witches were seen with both love and with trepidation. You know, the healers, that's what you wanted, was a midwife there, that was a healer that was known for delivering babies. But at the same time, some of the women that were supposedly witches, people were terrified of them.
Yeah, sure. The Bell Witch, like you mentioned, is definitely the number one uh, case of witches that I've been able to find. Um, and the weird thing is it's called the Bell Witch, but it's not really a witch story. I guess is the best way to get at that. It's more of I guess like a demon type thing, or
I
at
would
least a
consider
demonic presence.
I would consider it like a poltergeist.
Yeah, definitely strange, no matter what. But the Bell Witch, like I said, it's not a stereotypical. When you hear the word witch, you're thinking like the Wicked Witch of the West, or something like that with the pointy hat. This thing was sort of a disembodied uh, spirit, I guess. But it starts out with a guy, and I believe his name was John Bale. Does that sound right?
Yeah, that's correct, and it happened in Robertson County, Tennessee.
Okay. And so it's called the Bell Witch because it primarily affected the Bell family. And so John was, I believe the story starts, he was out hunting one day, and there was a creature that he couldn't identify, and it was a cross between a rabbit and something else. I don't remember the story off the top of my head, but he shoots this thing, kills it, and doesn't think any more about it. And after that, it began a series of strange occurrences that happened, and the family heard voices. There would be things that would disappear from their house. Doors would slam, stuff like that, and it happened for I think it was like 10 or 15 years, and then finally John Bale passed away, and the sightings kind of died down for a while. Is that sort of the same story you found?
Yeah, that's it. And it was about 5 years.
Okay.
It wasn't quite 15 years, but then it told the daughter, this entity told the daughter that it would be back in 7 years, and then it reappeared, started doing the same things that it used
That's
to do,
right.
and then uh, they kind of ignored it when it came back, her and her new husband, and they kind of ignored it, and eventually, almost like it got bored and left. Um, Here's a little excerpt from it. It said, at one point in time, the entity claimed that it was Old Cape Bat's witch, and it always responded favorably to that name, so it liked to be called Cape Bats. Um,
So yeah,
it
the,
says
the
that,
version I heard, the only name that was associated anywhere was John Bale. So I didn't see Kate Batts or anything like that. So
yeah, it said the haunting began in 1817, and John Bell witnessed a creature resembling a dog, and he tried to shoot it, but it disappeared. And then later he saw a giant bird on a fence that flew away, and he couldn't identify the bird. And then Dean, a slave to the Bell family, reported being followed by a large black dog. So it was also a shapeshifter.
mm,
Um, It's pretty interesting. They heard the sounds of gnawing and visible dogs fighting in chains on the floor. And then Mr. Bell began experiencing paralysis of the mouth. Soon it was beginning to pull hair, sticking people with pins. It got to the point where people would come in to test the witch, and it's John Johnston is one of the guys' name that is listed here. He came in and he apologized. I think it was him. He apologized to the family for his skepticism after being proven. It says that the witch referred to John Bell Sr. as Old Jack. It doesn't say why, and then eventually it's believed that the witch poisoned him. Once again, there's no mention of a witch at all. It seems to be more of a disembodied spirit.
Yeah, and on that same note, I also read a story. You mentioned people coming in to investigate this thing. At one point, General Andrew, my mind just went blank. Later became the president.
Andrew Jackson.
Andrew Jackson, thank you. Before he was president, he actually came and investigated the witch, and it was said that as he entered the Bell property, all of the wagon wheels on his wagons fell off and his horses ran away. So that's definitely unique that it caught the attention of somebody as prominent as him. Because even before he was president, he was a very well-known general in the Army. So the fact that it caught his attention enough to go investigate it, even a little bit is amazing in and of itself.
Yeah, it claimed that it was there due to them messing with an Indian burial mound. Of course, the entity itself was many times proven that it would lie, and that's why a lot of people believe it was demonic. But it would know things that went on in town. It supposedly would leave and come back in an instant. That way, it could gather gossip on people. It loved gossip, apparently. It wanted to know more and more and more about people. So it's a incredibly interesting story. I know you can still visit the area. I believe they actually offer tours now.
See, I never got the version of the story I read never said anything about the gossip, so that's interesting.
Yeah, I read a bunch of versions of that story. So, yeah, that was one of the first stories I ever really got into when I was amazed at how well it interacted with people.
Yeah. That's definitely the thing because, according to every one of those stories, it seems like nobody went there without having some sort of an experience with it.
That's actually why a lot of people believe it was a hoax.
Yeah, I was going to say, which makes me almost believe that it was, like you said, a hoax, not real at all.
Yeah, a lot of people believe that the oldest daughter was actually causing it. That she was actually, she could crack her toes and make popping sounds with her toes. That was pretty common for mediums and stuff in the early 19th century. When the supernatural movement or the medium movement came through America, Houdini helped to debunk a lot of that stuff.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I was also going to point out that it sounds like some of what John Bell had going on is almost stroke-like, like he was having a stroke. You were talking about the paralysis of the mouth, and then I remember the version I read. I don't remember the specifics of the illness it gave, but it definitely sounded almost like a stroke or a poison of some kind that he was suffering from.
Yeah, a palsy is what they would have called it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he definitely had probably some neurological issues going on. I mean, more than likely they were eating with lead spoons.
I was going to say heavy metal poisoning.
Yeah. So, well, let's go on to talk some more about the granny witches and how they fit into the Appalachian folklore. So, a granny witch was a healer, and a lot of times her power is she could read a verse from the Bible or quote a verse from the Bible and stop bleeding. That one is a very common practice that they supposedly could do. supposedly they couldn't be stung by bees, so they were good to gather honey. They were bee whisperers, is what they were called. Um, Many times they were herbalists, and they could tell you, what an herb could be used for and where you could most commonly find it. And the same thing with animal parts. They could tell you what animal parts you needed to do things, and they could predict the weather. They could read the signs and tell you when you needed to plant your garden or when your cow needed to be slaughtered, things like that. So their magic tended to be more practical of a sort.
Yeah, I was going to say a lot of stories tend to have them dealing with potions and things like that more than the actual magic craft, I guess, is the best word for it. You don't hear about them very often actually casting spells. It's more about making potions or some knowledge that they've gained through whatever means.
Yeah, the cool thing about it is some of those things, I can attribute to not only my grandmother, but my grandfather or our grandfather.
Right.
Um, because Granny, one time I burned myself and she mixed up something with using butter, apple butter, and salt for the burn and put it on me. Um, my grandfather, he was what they would be considered a bee whisperer. And so, he could loot the hives. I remember looting the hives with him when I was little, and he would only wear a mask to keep him off his face. Um, Papa was also a dowser. Dowsing is something that was associated with these mountain witches or these mountain people. So, all these things are extremely interesting.
Yeah, and a lot of times you hear the word mountain witch, and a lot of people's first thought is, it's somebody who's not very educated, something like that. But a lot of the times it's really, you know, an old person, normally an old woman who, has survived a very long time, and they're a widower or they were never married to start with, and they're living on their own, and it's really just tricks that they figured out through their life. How to predict the weather, how to, when to plant stuff, all that good stuff, and it's sort of practical world knowledge, but a lot of people wouldn't pay attention to it, so it was sort of seen as a special ability.
Yeah, it's something that's very, very interesting. Maybe not supernatural, though I'm sure it would appear that way. I do know that one time my grandfather fell and split his shin open. He was bleeding pretty badly. And one of the ladies that was there with us quoted a Bible verse, and the bleeding stopped. So, some of that stuff definitely falls into the realm of supernatural abilities.
hmm
Um,
and dowsing is another one of those things that, for anybody who's not in familiar with the idea of dowsing, you take two dowsing rods, and there's different ways to make them, but most commonly they're made out of wood, and you hold them in your hands and you walk, and as you pass over a source of water, the sticks cross. Definitely an odd, strange thing that very much is borderline what people would call supernatural.
yeah, and it's funny because sometimes they can test that stuff and the dowsing comes back higher than it should be. They'll find a higher percentage of water than what they should find. And then sometimes it comes back where they don't find anything at all. It's guesswork. So, I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence about the dowsing thing.
Yeah,
Um, I've
it's
seen Papaw. Once again, I've seen Papaw locate water several times. You
Yeah, I
know,
was going to say it's one of those things that you see somebody talking about it on TV or in a show or something, and you're like, man, that there's no way that's real. That's completely fake. But you see it in real life. Somebody just randomly walked through the woods, sticks cross, and you dig down and there's water, or there sometimes you can use it to look for minerals, but water is the most common. I saw a guy at uh, one time use it to find a grave, which was definitely weird. But he walked around, all over the woods at scout camp, and all of a sudden the sticks crossed, and he, you know, found this grave that we unburied the marker had been mowed over, but we unburied it enough to find where the marker was originally at, and we placed a new one there. So I've definitely seen it work, which works against everything that's logical.
Yeah, that's definitely one of those things. If you used a dowsing rod to find water, you were called a water witch. So like you said, that borders on the supernatural, paranormal. You have no idea what causes that to happen. I mean, the people that do it don't know what caused it to happen either.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done. Papa showed me some stuff with it, and I've done some dowsing myself, and every time I found something with it, it's amazed me. I've probably been more surprised than the people I was looking for the stuff for.
Well, you want
So
to move on to the infernal witches, I guess is the best term there.
yeah, the other view of witches in the Appalachian Mountains is that they get their powers straight from the devil. Um, these are the kind of the classic witch, I guess you would say.
Yeah, you're thinking Marie Laveau and witches like that when you think about these witches.
Yeah, they're seen as the bad guys and the boogeyman. Um, Actually, the mother of the dog man was supposedly a witch like this.
Mm-hmm.
Where she got her powers from the devil, or practiced a darker sort of magic. Now these witches, there's some legends that are associated with them. If a witch is on your property or around an area that is on your farm, she can make your milk spoil. She can make your eggs go bad. Um, she may try to steal a lock of your hair, try to get you to do things. And there's a lot of stuff that goes along with this. And you got a story Mom shared with you about one, don't you?
Yeah, so you and I were talking earlier on the phone, and Mom overheard it. We were talking about witches, so I went ahead and asked her if she had heard any witch stories. Because a lot of I figured she'd give me a granny witch story. Is honestly what I was expecting. But she said that when she was growing up, she was really young girl, and she remembered somebody, and she couldn't remember if it was Granny or maybe one of Granny's sisters or a cousin or something. When they were growing up in East Stone Gap, they had a neighbor, and whoever this family member that Mom was talking to was said or told her to never give this lady anything that belongs to you, because she'll use it to curse you, or put a curse on you. And of course, she didn't put much stock in it, but she said, looking back on it, she remembers her grandmother being scared of this lady. And that's a strange occurrence in and of itself, because I don't think her granny was scared of anything.
No, I don't know of her ever being scared at all. Even around rattlesnakes and stuff, I don't remember getting scared.
Yeah, but she said that Granny had at least a healthy amount of respect for this lady, and borderline scared of her. So that, like I said, that's an odd story, because I was expecting a Granny witch. I know the area where Granny moved to later in her life. There's an area called Granny Raleigh Holler. And, you and I both sort of expected there to be a Granny witch story about Granny Raleigh, um, which again falls into that archetype of, older lady that lives by herself, top of a mountain. That's the kind of story that I would have expected to get. But Mom said she never heard any kind of a witch story at all associated with her. So
There,
didn't
there,
get what I wanted out of that, but definitely a strange story nonetheless.
yeah, there is a story supposedly of that area. The area is called Olinger, Virginia,
Hmm.
or the locals will tell you Olanger,
Yeah.
and population of about 12. I mean, it's a really really rural area.
That's if you count the cows.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's an extremely rural area. But there is a story supposedly of the witch of Olinger, and I've heard of people going down there before and supposedly being chased through the woods. And I mean, when you're down there, you're in this area, and I mean, there's no lights. You're on top of a mountain. I mean, mountain lions screaming down there. There's no telling what you're going to get into when you get up in the woods, but it's one of those areas that definitely is got a creepy vibe to it anyway. And so I can see people getting up in there and hopping themselves up and getting scared and taking off and blaming it on the witch of Olinger.
Absolutely. It's oddly enough, I never got a large amount of creepy vibes from the woods down there. Definitely not the amount of the ones here above the house that we got who knows how many weird stuff happened to us in.
Yeah.
But I could definitely see how it would be a creepy place to be, because like you said, it is absolutely the middle of nowhere.
Anytime you're in an old growth forest, if you're not used to it, it's got a real still quality to it. You don't hear a lot of stuff, you don't hear a lot of sounds, and so that 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 helps to breed that atmosphere of scared, terrified.
Absolutely.
All
Well,
right, you got any more stories to talk about? You got anything else with these witches?
I've got nothing else.
Um, in the future, I hope we can do a full episode on just the mountain magic.
Yes,
Because I've got a lot of good stories to tell. We can talk about the robin beehives not getting stung and things like that.
absolutely. Those that mountain magic is definitely an odd occurrence or a strange occurrence, because it's borderline scientific in most cases. Um,
Yeah,
but at the same time, it's borderline supernatural. So it's odd, kind of like the
yeah.
dowsing.
Um, I'm going to touch real quick. We didn't cover. There's a lot of things we didn't cover with these witches tonight. We didn't talk about Wicca. We didn't talk about stuff like that. Uh, the newer witch religions, things like that. And the reason why is because you don't really find a lot of that in this mountain folklore. Um, if you look up even things like uh, the Salem witch trials and stuff like that, you don't get a lot of the you don't get a lot of the negativity with the witchcraft in the Appalachian Mountains like a lot of people expect you to. There's not a lot of hangings or people getting killed because they're witches.
No,
Mainly
a
because
lot.
Appalachian people keep to themselves. You
Yeah, I
know,
was gonna say a lot of times, especially with those like granny witches, they have such a practical purpose that they're a very important part of the community. And they're you're not gonna go out and hang a lady that gives you good advice on when to plant your crops that's keeping you alive.
absolutely not.
So
So yeah, that negativity, and a lot of times, um, you'll find a lot with the difference between like the mountain witches and other witches is the mountain witches are more often than not devout Christians.
hmm
You'll find them using the Bible in their practice a lot. So you don't get the kind of the boogeyman type witch, and a lot of the boogeyman type witch stories, they're just stories to tell to scare kids.
yes.
So that's it. That's all I got tonight, JD.
All right. Well, as always, if you like what you hear, like and subscribe. I know I've heard from a couple of people that they've wanted to leave comments, but for some reason they can't leave them on the YouTube video. If you've got a comment and YouTube won't let you comment, or whatever the case may be, either send us a message, or if you'll jump over, all of these videos are posted on our Facebook page, Strange Appalachia. Leave us a comment there, and we will absolutely see that and try to get back to you as soon as possible. I also want to throw a little bit of a teaser out there. Coming up, hopefully in the next month or so, we've got an investigation plan or hopefully going to get an investigation plan for a little bit of a more of a ghost hunt, which we've not really done yet as part of the podcast. So we're working on getting that scheduled. We wanted to do it this month, and it just didn't quite work out. But we've got that coming up. Hopefully by about the end of November, we'll get that in. And I'm really looking forward to that because it's like I said, really the first sort of ghost hunt we've done as part of Strange Appalachia. Everything else has been walking around in the wood looking for tracks. and ghosts don't leave tracks. So now we've got a ghost story to investigate. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I've spoken to my manager. That would be my wife, and she's cleared me to go. So
Heck yeah.
it should be a lot of fun.
So we'll get that set up, and hopefully that's as interesting for you all as it is for us, because that's something we've been looking forward to for a while now.
Yep, can't wait for it.
All right, as always, see you next week. Like and subscribe, and leave us a comment if you'd like.
Thank y'all.